It all began on a stormy night in a quiet Pennsylvania town that most people wouldn't even notice on a map. Emily Carson, the eldest daughter of the Carson family, was driving home from a late shift at the local diner. Rain pounded against the windshield like tiny hammers, turning the roads slick and treacherous. Emily was known for her cautious nature, always double-checking her mirrors, slowing down at intersections. But that night, fate seemed determined to catch her off guard. Her headlights barely cut through the downpour, and the wind made it nearly impossible to see the road ahead. As she rounded a familiar curve near the outskirts of town, a flash of light illuminated the roadway, and Emily's car skidded uncontrollably. She slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The vehicle spun, twisting against the guardrail before finally coming to a jarring stop in a shallow ditch. Panic set in as she tried to move, her hands shaking and heart racing. Lightning flashed again, casting eerie shadows over the wrecked car, as though the storm itself was bearing witness to the tragedy. By the time the first passerby arrived, Emily had already lost consciousness. Paramedics rushed her to the nearest hospital, fighting against the relentless rain and the town's winding roads. Inside the emergency room, doctors worked frantically, but the injuries were catastrophic. Every effort to save her seemed to falter against the sheer force of what had happened. Hours later, despite the desperate attempts of medical staff, Emily was pronounced dead. News of her passing spread quickly through the town, leaving everyone in shock and disbelief. The funeral arrangements were swift but solemn. Friends and family gathered at the small-town chapel, filling the pews with tears, prayers, and whispered memories. The pastor spoke softly about Emily's kindness, her bright spirit, and her dreams that were cut tragically short. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the earth damp and the skies a dull gray, almost as if nature itself mourned the loss. Flowers lined the walkway, white lilies dominating the display, their petals heavy with water. The town seemed to hold its breath as the casket was lowered into the ground. Emily's younger sister, Rachel, stood by the grave, numb and frozen, barely able to comprehend the finality of it all. She clutched a small bouquet, her hands trembling, and whispered a goodbye she knew she would never get to hear answered. Around her, family members tried to console one another, but the grief was overwhelming, heavy like a dark cloud that refused to lift. Emily was gone, buried beneath the cold soil, and the world suddenly felt emptier, quieter, as if a vital spark had been extinguished in that small Pennsylvania town. After Emily's funeral, life in the Carson household changed in ways no one could have anticipated. Rachel, only 24 at the time, felt like she had been thrown into a shadowy world where laughter and joy were now distant memories. Each morning she woke up, the first thought that hit her was the emptiness in her house. The vacant room across the hall, Emily's favorite mug still sitting in the sink, and the clothes in the closet that would never be worn again. The loss wasn't just emotional. It seeped into every corner of her life, making even the simplest decisions feel impossible. Rachel tried to hold herself together, throwing herself into work at a small publishing company in town. But even at the office, Emily's absence was palpable. Every cheerful story on the local news or gossip from coworkers only reminded Rachel of the things her sister would never experience. Birthday parties, holidays, and casual family dinners all became silent reminders of the life Emily should have had. Friends noticed her withdrawing, her smiles less frequent, and her eyes carrying a constant, almost haunted look. Sleep became elusive, and sometimes Rachel would wake in the middle of the night, certain she had heard Emily calling her name. In an attempt to cope, Rachel began journaling, hoping to capture the memories of her sister before they faded. Each page she wrote was soaked in longing and despair, from their childhood summers spent at the lake to late-night talks about dreams and fears. But even writing brought a bittersweet pain. While it kept Emily alive in her mind, it also reminded her that those moments were now unreachable, frozen in a past she could never return to. Every word, every memory, made the gap left by Emily's death feel impossibly wide. As the years passed, Rachel sought therapy, desperate to find a way to breathe again. She attended sessions faithfully, pouring her grief into every conversation, hoping a professional could help her understand why life had been so cruel. Yet even with guidance, the phantom of Emily lingered. Rachel would catch herself setting the table for two, reaching for Emily's chair in a restaurant, or hesitating when making plans, always subconsciously expecting her sister to be there. Grief, she realized, wasn't something that faded with time. It transformed, settling into the cracks of everyday life, shaping her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Even as Rachel attempted to move forward, dating, making new friends, and learning to smile again, Emily's shadow loomed large. Weddings she attended, parties she hosted, and even casual family gatherings carried a silent void. Rachel often imagined Emily sitting beside her, laughing at the same jokes, offering advice, or rolling her eyes at Rachel's quirks. It was a constant ache, a mix of love, nostalgia, and unending sorrow. Rachel's life had slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the heart of it, the part that Emily once filled, remained forever hollow, waiting for a presence that could never come back. Years after Emily's tragic death, Rachel finally found a flicker of happiness in her life. She met Jake, a kind-hearted, dependable man who seemed to understand her grief without needing explanations. Their connection was instant and deep, something Rachel hadn't felt since her sister's passing. As their relationship grew, so did the possibility of moving forward, of building a life that didn't revolve entirely around the shadow of loss. When Jake proposed on a crisp autumn evening, under a sky painted with orange and pink, Rachel felt a surge of hope, but also a twinge of guilt. She wished Emily could have been there, to share in the moment, to laugh and cry alongside her. Planning the wedding became both a joy and a reminder of what Rachel had lost. She threw herself into every detail, from choosing flowers to selecting the perfect venue in the small town park where they had first met. Invitations were sent, guest lists finalized, and for the first time in years, Rachel allowed herself to imagine a day filled with happiness and love. Yet, every choice, every decision carried the silent question: where would Emily be if she were alive? Rachel's family, especially her mother, constantly reminded her of this absence. Her mother, still mourning her eldest daughter, insisted that they honor Emily in a special way during the ceremony. On the morning of the wedding, the air was crisp, and the sun rose over the town with an almost surreal beauty, casting golden light across dew-soaked grass. Rachel's nerves were a mix of excitement and unease. The family had one final ritual before heading to the venue, a quiet visit to Emily's grave. Rachel's hands trembled as she placed a single white rose atop the headstone, whispering words she had rehearsed in her mind for years. "I hope you're here, Emily. I hope you can see this." Her mother stood silently beside her, tears glistening on her cheeks, while Jake put a comforting hand on her shoulder, though even he felt the weight of the moment. The drive from the cemetery to the wedding venue was tense yet filled with anticipation. Rachel kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see Emily's familiar face somewhere along the roadside. Her heart pounded with a mixture of anxiety and hope, the lines between reality and imagination blurring. Every flower vendor, every decoration, every guest seemed to carry a subtle reminder of her sister, as if Emily's presence was woven invisibly into the very fabric of the day. Even Jake noticed Rachel's distant gaze, sensing the invisible tether that tied her to a past she could neither fully let go of nor escape. By the time guests began arriving, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The sun dipped slightly, casting long shadows across the park, giving the wedding a cinematic, almost otherworldly glow. Rachel adjusted her dress, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car, trying to focus on the moment. Guests smiled, chatted, and took their seats, but the lingering sadness of Emily's absence was palpable to anyone who knew the family's story. There was an unspoken tension, a quiet, collective awareness that this day, while joyful, would never be complete without the presence of the sister who had been taken too soon. The ceremony was unfolding beautifully. Guests smiled, laughter floated through the air, and the sun shimmered off the decorations, casting a warm glow over the wedding garden. Rachel tried to focus on the vows, on Jake's hand in hers, on the promise of a future together. But then, something strange caught the attention of several guests at the edge of the crowd. A figure, tall, pale, and moving with a strange, almost ethereal grace, stood watching the ceremony from beneath a large oak tree. At first, people assumed it was a late guest, someone who had gotten lost. But the way she moved, her posture, the flowing white dress, it didn't feel right. The whispers started quietly, almost hesitant, as if no one wanted to say the words aloud. "Is that Emily?" "No, it can't be." Eyes darted back and forth, phones lifted instinctively, and a nervous energy swept through the crowd. Rachel, caught in mid-vow, noticed the ripple of unease spreading across her friends and family. She turned slightly and froze. There, at the edge of her peripheral vision, was a woman whose features were hauntingly familiar. Her hair, her eyes, her smile, everything about her screamed Emily. But that was impossible. Emily had been gone for years. Rachel's heart began to pound. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to check her sister's grave, to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Yet, she couldn't look away. The figure started to move closer, gliding almost as if floating above the grass. Guests gasped, pointing fingers, and a few murmured prayers under their breath. The closer the woman came, the more perfect the resemblance. It wasn't just a look-alike, it was uncanny. Every detail, the curve of her jaw, the familiar tilt of her head, was exactly like Emily. Even the air seemed to shift around her, heavy with disbelief. Panic began to ripple through the guests. Phones were raised, videos started recording, and some people even stepped back, unsure whether to confront the figure or flee. Rachel's mother grabbed her arm, whispering frantically, "This can't be real." "It's not real, Rachel." But Rachel couldn't deny what she was seeing. Her legs felt rooted to the ground as the woman walked closer, her eyes locking on Rachel's. The crowd seemed to shrink around her, as if time itself had slowed. Every heartbeat, every breath, was amplified. The surreal sight of someone who should be dead standing inches away was overwhelming, almost unbearable. Then came the moment that would be burned into everyone's memory forever. The woman smiled softly, an expression so gentle and familiar it made Rachel's knees weaken. She whispered Rachel's name, almost carried by the wind, yet perfectly audible to her. Gasps echoed across the garden as people exchanged terrified glances. Some reached out as if to touch her, hoping this was a miracle, while others backed away in fear. But before anyone could approach, the woman, calm, serene, yet terrifying, slipped behind the reception tent, disappearing from sight as suddenly as she had appeared. The entire garden was left in stunned silence, hearts pounding, minds racing, and one impossible question hanging in the air: who, or what, had just walked into Rachel's wedding? As the woman disappeared behind the reception tent, a wave of panic swept through the guests. Some people froze in shock, unable to comprehend what they had just seen. Others murmured frantically, their voices rising in disbelief. Phones were held high, fingers shaking as videos were recorded, capturing fleeting glimpses of the figure. The air, once filled with the soft hum of celebration, now felt charged, almost electric, as if the garden itself sensed the intrusion of something impossible. The joyous occasion had shifted in an instant into a surreal nightmare. Rachel stood paralyzed, her heart hammering in her chest. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, and her hands shook uncontrollably. She turned to Jake, hoping he could ground her, but even his normally calm face showed shock and fear. Guests began whispering urgently among themselves, some pointing to the place where the figure had vanished. "Did you see her?" one woman asked, voice trembling. "It looked just like Emily." No one wanted to voice the full truth aloud, yet every gaze in the garden was drawn to the empty space behind the tent, as if expecting her to emerge again. The photographer, caught in the middle of the chaos, tried to keep recording. He moved stealthily toward the tent, trying to capture any sign of the mysterious woman. Other guests began approaching cautiously, some in curiosity, some in fear. Questions flew through the air. "Who is that? Is this some kind of prank? Emily, she's dead. How is this possible?" The tension was palpable, thick like fog. People who had been laughing minutes before now exchanged panicked glances, unsure if they should flee, call for help, or simply stand frozen in awe. Jake, trying to protect Rachel, stepped in front of her, shielding her from the crowd. He demanded calm, but his voice betrayed the terror he felt. "Nobody touch anything. We don't know what this is," he warned, though even he was shaken. Meanwhile, Rachel's mother had moved to the edge of the tent, peering inside, her face pale and drawn. She whispered prayers under her breath, repeating Emily's name over and over, as if calling might make sense of the impossible. The chaos had reached a fever pitch. Some guests were crying, some were whispering curses, and a few even laughed nervously, convinced they were witnessing some elaborate trick. Then came the strangest moment. A faint breeze swept across the garden, carrying with it a soft whisper of Rachel's name, chilling her to the bone. Several guests claimed they heard it too. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. The sound seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, echoing through the trees and the flowers, brushing against the ears of everyone present. The crowd held its breath, hearts pounding, unsure whether to scream or faint. The impossible had entered their world, leaving a lingering question that no one could answer. If Emily was truly gone, then what had just appeared at the wedding? The morning after the wedding, the town was buzzing with rumors that spread faster than wildfire. Guests shared their footage, each video showing a fleeting, ghostly figure at the edge of the garden. Local news outlets caught wind of the story, sensationalizing it with headlines like "Bride's Dead Sister Appears at Ceremony" and "Ghost or Trick." Mysterious figure shocks wedding guests. But for Rachel and her family, the spectacle was terrifyingly personal. The questions were endless. Had someone broken into the wedding? Was it a cruel prank? Or, worse, was Emily really standing there, defying death itself? Police arrived at the Carson home the next day, notebooks in hand, questions ready. Detectives reviewed wedding footage, interviewed every guest, and searched the perimeter of the venue. Security camera footage from nearby streets showed no unusual activity, no stranger entering, no suspicious vehicle, nothing to explain the appearance. And yet, the videos from the ceremony itself clearly showed a figure moving gracefully across the garden, her features unmistakably identical to Emily. The detectives were baffled, some struggling to hide skepticism, others unwilling to dismiss the eyewitness accounts outright. Meanwhile, Rachel was interviewed multiple times, her voice trembling as she recounted the horrifying moment. She described the soft whisper of her name, the serene yet unsettling smile, and the way the woman seemed almost to float across the grass. Detectives asked about family disputes, potential impersonators, or any enemies who might stage such an elaborate hoax, but nothing made sense. Every detail Rachel gave matched what other witnesses had reported. It was as if Emily had stepped out of the grave to attend her sister's wedding, and no rational explanation existed to counter the evidence. In the days that followed, the local authorities decided to exhume Emily's grave to confirm her remains. The news shocked the entire town. Family and neighbors watched silently as the cemetery opened its gates to the investigation team. When Emily's coffin was carefully unearthed, medical examiners verified that her body was indeed inside, intact, untouched, and conclusively deceased. There were no signs of tampering, no evidence that she had been moved or replaced. Forensic records matched the original autopsy. It was undeniable. Emily had been dead for years, yet eyewitnesses insisted they had seen her alive. The contradiction hung heavy over the town, casting a dark cloud over an already tragic story. Adding to the mystery, digital experts analyzed the wedding footage frame by frame. Some frames showed a faint distortion in the air surrounding the figure, subtle waves that didn't match shadows or lighting anomalies. Experts speculated about reflections, lens flares, or video glitches, but even skeptics admitted that the figure's precise facial features, gestures, and movements could not be explained by ordinary technology. It was as if someone, or something, had recreated Emily with a terrifying level of realism. The town was left with a chilling realization. The explanation, whatever it was, would challenge everything they thought they knew about life, death, and reality itself. Weeks after the wedding, as the town tried to make sense of the impossible, a neighbor came forward with a story that nobody had known. She recalled seeing Emily in the months before her accident, spending long hours in her room, tinkering with gadgets, wires, and strange devices. Emily had always been curious, fascinated by technology, but lately her obsession had taken a dark, almost secretive turn. She had mentioned working on something she called the last goodbye, though she never fully explained what it was. The neighbor admitted she had thought Emily was just being quirky, experimenting with electronics as she often did. But now, in light of the wedding incident, everything seemed ominously different. Rachel and her family were skeptical at first. Could it really be possible that Emily had orchestrated the appearance themselves? The idea seemed absurd, yet the neighbor insisted she had seen Emily test strange devices that projected images in mid-air, holograms so realistic they could fool anyone at first glance. Emily had been meticulous, recording her movements, gestures, and even practicing her expressions in front of a mirror. The revelation sent a shiver down Rachel's spine. It was terrifying to think that something she loved so dearly could manipulate reality in a way that made the impossible seem real. Determined to understand, Rachel and her parents examined Emily's old room, sifting through notebooks, schematics, and half-finished prototypes. They discovered detailed plans for a holographic projection system, capable of creating lifelike images that could move, speak, and interact with people. Emily had even programmed subtle movements, blinking, and gestures, recording herself in every scenario imaginable. The realization hit like a thunderbolt. Emily had spent years engineering a way to attend Rachel's wedding, even if it meant doing so from beyond the grave. The thought was both awe-inspiring and haunting. Experts were brought in to test the remaining equipment. When activated, the devices could indeed project a figure with uncanny realism, appearing as a ghostly presence that seemed tangible. It was the perfect simulation, designed to evoke shock, joy, and confusion all at once. Rachel couldn't believe it. Her sister, gone for years, had orchestrated one final performance. It was as if Emily had planned her own posthumous farewell, ensuring she could be part of the family's most important day, even if only as a hologram. The blend of genius and eeriness left Rachel with a chilling respect for her sister's brilliance, mixed with an ache for the life that had been stolen too soon. Even after the truth was uncovered, the emotional impact lingered. Guests who had witnessed the figure still described a mix of awe and terror, insisting they had seen Emily with their own eyes. Rachel felt a complex swirl of emotions: relief that her sister wasn't actually alive, grief for the life they lost, and wonder at the ingenuity that made her presence so believable. Emily had left them a final, haunting gift: proof that love can transcend even death, but also a stark reminder that the boundaries between reality and illusion are sometimes far thinner than we realize. The story of that wedding, and the woman who had come back from the grave, would haunt the town forever. As Rachel stood at the edge of the garden that night, long after the guests had gone, she couldn't help but feel Emily's presence one last time. It wasn't just in the hologram, the technology, or the ghostly memory. It was in the laughter that echoed in her heart, in the love that remained unbroken despite years of loss. Emily had found a way to say goodbye on her own terms, to remind them that even death couldn't erase the bonds of family. Rachel took a deep breath and whispered into the cool night air, "Thank you, Emily. I see you." And for the first time since that stormy night years ago, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Though the line between reality and illusion had been blurred, one truth remained clear: love, memory, and connection can reach beyond the grave, leaving a mark that no loss, no time, and no mystery can ever erase. And as the lights of the reception hall dimmed and the last echoes of the day faded, one thing was certain: the story of Emily Carson would be remembered forever, not just as a tale of shock and fear, but as a haunting reminder that sometimes the impossible is simply a reflection of love's enduring power.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.